The blood in the snow was the first thing Xavier noticed. Dark crimson drops frozen against pristine white, leading up the steep mountain trail like breadcrumbs in a nightmare. He dismounted from his horse, crouching low to examine the tracks, his breath forming clouds in the frigid December air of 1882. The prints were small, feminine, and growing increasingly erratic as they climbed higher into the Colorado Rockies. Someone was running, bleeding, and from the looks of it, had been left to die in the unforgiving wilderness above Pueblo. Samuel had been tracking outlaws for 3 days when he stumbled upon this new trail, but something about those desperate footprints made him abandon his original quarry without a second thought. He was a practical man, hardened by years of working cattle ranches and occasionally helping the local marshal, but he had never been able to ignore someone in genuine need. His father had raised him better than that, even if the old man had been dead these past 5 years. The tracks were maybe 6 hours old, which meant whoever made them was either dead already or clinging to life somewhere up this mountain. Samuel tied his horse securely to a pine tree, grabbed his rifle and pack, and began climbing. The higher he went, the worse the signs became. More blood, torn fabric caught on branches, and eventually a woman's shawl abandoned in the snow. Samuel's jaw tightened as he pushed forward, his long legs carrying him steadily upward despite the treacherous terrain. The sun was starting its descent toward the western peaks, and he knew that once darkness fell, the temperature would drop to deadly levels. He had maybe 2 hours of daylight left to find her. When he finally saw her, crumpled against the base of an enormous boulder, Samuel's heart stuttered in his chest. She was conscious but barely, her lips blue with cold, her dark hair matted with blood from a wound on her temple. Her dress was torn and inadequate for winter weather, and she was shaking so violently that he could hear her teeth chattering from 20 feet away. But what struck him most were her eyes, wide and terrified as she saw him approach, as if she expected him to finish whatever job someone else had started. "Easy now," Samuel said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I am here to help. My name is Xavier. I saw your trail and came looking." She tried to speak, but her lips were too frozen to form words. Samuel immediately shrugged off his heavy coat and draped it around her shoulders, then pulled a canteen from his pack. "Small sips," he instructed, helping her drink. The water seemed to revive her slightly, enough that she could meet his eyes with something other than pure terror. "They left me," she finally managed to whisper, her voice raw and broken. "Said I was not worth the trouble anymore." Rage flashed through Samuel, hot and fierce, but he kept his expression calm. "Who left you?" "My husband and his brother," she said, and then her face crumpled. "Former husband, I suppose. He wanted me dead. I ran, but I got lost in the storm last night." Samuel looked at the wound on her head, the bruises becoming visible on her throat and wrists. This was not just abandonment. This was attempted murder. "Can you walk?" he asked gently. She tried to stand but immediately collapsed back against the boulder, her legs refusing to cooperate. Samuel did not hesitate. He gathered her into his arms, surprised at how light she was, how fragile she felt against his chest. She stiffened at first, then seemed to realize she had no choice but to trust him. Her head dropped against his shoulder as he began the careful descent back down the mountain. "What is your name?" Samuel asked, partly to keep her conscious and partly because he genuinely wanted to know. "Hannah," she whispered. "Hannah Brennan. Though I suppose I can take back my maiden name now. Barrett. Hannah Barrett." "Nice to meet you, Hannah Barrett," Samuel said, adjusting his grip as he navigated around a particularly steep section. "I am going to get you somewhere safe and warm. Just stay with me, all right?" "Why?" The question was so quiet he almost missed it. Why what? Why are you helping me? You do not know me. You could have just kept riding." Samuel was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Because it is the right thing to do," he finally said. "And because no one deserves to die alone in the cold." He felt her relax slightly against him, her shaking beginning to ease now that she was wrapped in his coat and pressed against the warmth of his body. By the time they reached his horse, she had drifted into unconsciousness, which Samuel decided was probably for the best. He managed to mount with her still in his arms, settling her across his lap and wrapping them both in the extra blanket he kept in his saddlebag. The ride back to Pueblo would take several hours, but he had no choice. She needed a doctor, food, and proper shelter. The sun had set completely by the time Samuel rode into Pueblo, heading straight for Doc Morrison's house on the edge of town. The elderly physician took one look at Hannah's condition and immediately ushered them inside, directing Samuel to lay her on the examining table in his treatment room. Samuel reluctantly released her, stepping back to let the doctor work. "What happened?" Doc Morrison asked, already cutting away the torn fabric of Hannah's dress to assess her injuries. "Found her in the mountains," Samuel said. "Says her husband and his brother left her there to die." The doctor's expression darkened. "Harrison Brennan," Samuel's eyes sharpened. "You know him." "Everyone knows him. Mean drunk with a temper. Came through town about 3 months ago with his pretty young wife and his brother. Set up camp east of here, been causing trouble ever since." Doc Morrison shook his head as he cleaned the wound on Hannah's temple. "She is lucky you found her. Another few hours and she would have frozen to death. As it is, she has got hypothermia, a concussion, multiple contusions, and what looks like a badly sprained ankle. But she will live." Relief flooded through Samuel, surprising him with its intensity. He barely knew this woman, yet the thought of her dying had filled him with a cold dread he had not felt in years. "What do you need me to do?" "Help me get her warm. We need to raise her body temperature gradually. There is a spare bedroom upstairs. Get a fire going, warm some blankets, and then we will move her." Samuel did as instructed, his movements efficient and practiced. By the time they carried Hannah upstairs and settled her in the warm bed, color was beginning to return to her cheeks. Doc Morrison left instructions to wake him if her condition changed, then retired to his own room. Samuel found himself sitting in a chair beside Hannah's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of her breathing and wondering what kind of man would leave his wife to die in the mountains. Hannah woke shortly before dawn, her eyes fluttering open to find Samuel still sitting beside her. For a moment she looked confused, then memory seemed to flood back and tears spilled down her cheeks. "Hey now," Samuel said softly, reaching out to gently squeeze her hand. "You are safe. You are in Doc Morrison's house in Pueblo. No one is going to hurt you here. He will find me," Hannah whispered, her voice thick with fear. "Harrison always finds me when I try to leave. You have tried before," she nodded, looking away in shame. "Twice. The first time, I only made it to the next town before he caught up to me. He broke my arm. The second time I got further, but his brother tracked me down. They dragged me back and Harrison said next time I tried to run, he would kill me. I believed him. But then yesterday, they just decided to do it anyway. They took me up into the mountains and left me there. Harrison said I was too much trouble, that he was tired of dealing with me." Samuel felt that rage building again, but he kept his voice calm. "He is not going to touch you again. I promise you that." Hannah looked at him then, really looked at him, taking in his serious brown eyes, his strong jaw, the way he held himself with quiet confidence. "You do not know what he is capable of," she said softly. "Maybe not, but he does not know what I am capable of either." Over the next few days, Hannah's physical injuries began to heal. The swelling in her ankle went down, The cut on her temple closed up, and the bruises faded from purple to yellow. But Samuel could see that the internal wounds ran much deeper. She startled at loud noises, flinched when anyone moved too quickly near her, and had nightmares that left her gasping and crying in the dark. He found himself spending more and more time at Doc Morrison's house, ostensibly to help with chores but really just to make sure Hannah felt safe. They talked during those long winter days, sitting by the fire in the parlor while snow fell softly outside. Hannah told him about her life, about growing up poor in Kansas, about how Harrison Brennan had seemed like such a good prospect when he came courting. He had money, charm, and promises of a better life. She had married him at 18 and the abuse started almost immediately. "I should have known," she said quietly one afternoon, staring into the flames. There were signs. The way he talked about other people, the cruelty in his jokes. "But I was young and stupid and desperate to get away from my father's farm." "You were not stupid," Samuel said firmly. "He fooled you. That is what men like him do. They hide what they really are until it is too late." Hannah looked at him curiously. "You talk like you have known men like him before." "My mother's second husband," Samuel admitted. "After my father died, she remarried too quickly. Guy named Thompson seemed decent enough at first, then he started drinking, started hitting her. My older brother and I ran him off when I was 16, but the damage was done. My mother never really recovered. She died 2 years later." "I am sorry," Hannah said softly. "Me too. But it taught me something important, taught me to recognize men like that and to stand against them." Their eyes met and held, and something shifted between them in that moment. It was not quite attraction, not yet, but recognition, understanding, a sense that they had both been scarred by similar darkness and survived. On the 8th day after Samuel found her, Hannah was strong enough to come downstairs for dinner. Doc Morrison had invited Samuel to join them, and the three of them sat around the small dining table sharing venison stew and fresh bread. The conversation was light, carefully avoiding anything heavy, but Samuel found himself watching Hannah more than he should. She was beautiful, he realized, now that the worst of the bruising had faded. Not in a showy way, but in something deeper. There was strength in the set of her shoulders, intelligence in her dark eyes, and a quiet grace in how she moved despite everything she had endured. "Samuel, you have been spending a lot of time here," Doc Morrison said with a knowing smile. "Not that I am complaining, mind you. But do you not have work to get back to?" Samuel shifted uncomfortably. "I do some ranching, some tracking when the marshal needs help, nothing that cannot wait." "He has been avoiding his own life to babysit me," Hannah said, but there was no censure in her voice, just curiosity. "I am not babysitting," Samuel protested. "I am just making sure you are all right." "Why?" Hannah asked, echoing her question from that first day on the mountain. Samuel met her eyes across the table. "Because I want to," he said simply. "Because when I found you up there, something in me decided that your safety mattered. And I am not in the habit of going back on my own decisions." Hannah looked like she wanted to say something, but before she could, there was a loud pounding on the front door. All three of them froze. Doc Morrison started to rise, but Samuel was already moving, his hand dropping to the pistol at his hip. "Stay here," he said quietly, then went to answer the door. Harrison Brennan stood on the porch, and Samuel knew him instantly. He had the look of a man who enjoyed cruelty, with cold eyes and a sneer permanently etched into his face. His brother stood behind him, equally mean-looking. Both men were armed. "I am looking for my wife," Harrison said without preamble. "Heard she might be here." "Heard wrong," Samuel said evenly, blocking the doorway with his body. "That's so. Because I heard a cowboy brought a half-frozen woman down from the mountains about a week ago. That sounds an awful lot like my Hannah." If you left your wife in the mountains to die, then you have got no claim to her anymore." Harrison's expression turned dangerous. "You calling me a liar?" "I am calling you exactly what you are, a coward who tried to murder an innocent woman." Harrison's hand moved toward his gun, but Samuel was faster. His pistol was out and cocked before Harrison could clear leather, the barrel pointed directly at the other man's chest. "I would not," Samuel said softly, his voice deadly calm. "You draw on me, and you will be dead before you hit the ground. Your brother, too, if he is stupid enough to try." The two men froze, recognizing the cold certainty in Samuel's eyes. This was not a man who made idle threats. "She is my wife," Harrison said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "Not anymore. You ended that marriage when you left her to die. Now you have got two choices. You can turn around, leave town, and never come back. Or you can try to push this, and I will kill you where you stand and sleep just fine afterward." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Harrison spat on the porch and took a step back. "This is not over," he snarled. "Yeah, it is," Samuel said. "You just do not know it yet." He watched the two men walk away, not lowering his gun until they had mounted their horses and ridden out of sight. Only then did he holster his weapon and turn back inside, where he found Hannah standing in the hallway, white-faced and shaking. "He is going to come back," she whispered. "He is going to kill both of us." Samuel walked over to her and gently took her shoulders. "Look at me, Hannah. He is not going to touch you. I will not let him. You cannot watch me every hour of every day. Maybe not, but I can make sure you are somewhere he cannot get to you." "Where?" Samuel had been thinking about this for days, turning the idea over in his mind. Now he made the decision. "My ranch. It is about 15 miles north of here, up in the foothills. Defensible, isolated, and most importantly, mine. You can stay there as long as you need to." "I cannot ask you to do that." "You are not asking, I am offering." Hannah searched his face, looking for ulterior motives for the trap that surely had to be there, but all she saw was sincerity and determination. "Why?" she asked again, the question that seemed to define their entire relationship. "Because I have spent the last week getting to know you," Samuel said quietly. "And I have decided that you are worth protecting. If that makes me a fool, then so be it, but I am not going to let those men hurt you again." Tears spilled down Hannah's cheeks, but they were different tears than before. Not tears of fear or pain, but of something closer to relief or maybe hope. "All right," she whispered. "I will go with you." They left Pueblo 2 days later, as soon as Doc Morrison declared Hannah fit enough to travel. Samuel had spent those 2 days preparing, gathering supplies, checking his weapons, and making sure his ranch was ready for a guest. He had also stopped by the marshal's office to report what happened, though he knew the law would be little help. Men like Harrison Brennan rarely faced justice unless someone forced the issue. The ride to Samuel's ranch was cold but beautiful, the winter landscape transformed into something magical by fresh snow and bright sunshine. Hannah rode beside Samuel on a borrowed horse, bundled in warm clothes he had purchased for her in town. She was quiet for most of the journey, but Samuel could see her gradually relaxing as they left Pueblo behind. The ranch, when it came into view, was modest but well-maintained. A sturdy log cabin sat in a clearing, with a barn, corral, and a few outbuildings arranged around it. Mountains rose behind it, and a frozen stream cut through the property. It was isolated exactly as Samuel had promised, but it did not feel lonely. It felt peaceful. "It is not much," Samuel said as he helped Hannah dismount, "but it is home." "It is perfect," Hannah said softly, looking around with something like wonder in her eyes. "I cannot remember the last time somewhere felt safe." Samuel showed her inside, carrying her bag to the small guest room he had prepared. The cabin was warm, heated by a large stone fireplace, and surprisingly comfortable. There was a main room with the fireplace and kitchen area, 2 bedrooms, and even a separate room for bathing. Samuel had built it himself over the course of several years, and he felt an unexpected pride in showing it to Hannah. "You did all this yourself?" she asked, running her hand along the smooth wood of the mantel. "Most of it. Had some help with the barn raising, but the cabin I built with my own hands. It is remarkable." That first night they sat by the fire after dinner, the silence between them comfortable rather than awkward. Samuel was carving a piece of wood, his hands moving with practiced skill, while Hannah mended one of his shirts that had lost a button. It felt strangely domestic, almost like they were an actual couple rather than 2 people thrown together by circumstance. "Can I ask you something?" Hannah said suddenly. "Course. Why have you never married? A man like you with property and skills, you could have your pick of women in town." Samuel smiled slightly. "Never met anyone who made me want to change my life. I like my solitude, like things the way they are, or I did anyway." "Did?" He looked at her then, his expression serious. "Having you here does not feel like an imposition, Hannah. It feels right, like maybe my life was missing something and I just did not know it until now." Hannah's breath caught. "Samuel, I cannot be what you need. I am broken, damaged. I have got nothing to offer you except trouble and bad memories." "You are not broken," Samuel said firmly, setting down his carving. "You are hurt, and that is different. Hurt heals. And as for having nothing to offer, that is the biggest lie you have ever told. You are strong, Hannah. Strong enough to survive years of abuse. Strong enough to keep trying to escape even when it seemed impossible. Strong enough to keep going when most people would have given up. That is not nothing. That is everything." She stared at him, tears streaming down her face again, but she was smiling through them. "How do you do that?" she whispered. "Do what? See good in me when I cannot see it myself?" "Because it is there," Samuel said simply, clear as day to anyone willing to look. Winter deepened around them, and with it, something between Samuel and Hannah began to grow. It was not sudden or dramatic, but gradual and steady, building like snow accumulating on branches. They fell into a routine, working together to maintain the ranch, sharing meals and stories, learning each other's habits and preferences. Samuel taught Hannah to shoot, patiently instructing her until she could hit a target with reasonable accuracy. Hannah taught Samuel to cook better than just the basic trail food he had been surviving on, introducing flavor and variety to his meals. They laughed together, which surprised both of them. Samuel had a dry sense of humor that Hannah found delightful, and she had a quick wit that could catch him off guard and make him smile. But they also shared their pain, talking late into the night about their losses, their regrets, their fears. Samuel told her about his father's death, about the guilt he still carried that he had not been there. Hannah told him about the baby she had lost 2 years into her marriage, how Harrison had hit her while she was pregnant and caused her to miscarry, and how she had never been able to conceive again. "That is when I started trying to leave," she said quietly. "When I realized he had taken not just my present but my future too. Any chance I had of being a mother, of having a real family, he destroyed it." Samuel pulled her close, letting her cry against his chest. "I am so sorry," he murmured into her hair. "You deserved so much better than that." "Do you want children?" she asked, pulling back to look at him. "Someday, maybe, if I found the right woman, but it is not something I have spent much time thinking about. You should find someone who can give them to you." Samuel cupped her face gently. "Hannah, I have not been courting you because I want children from you. I have been courting you because you make me happier than I have ever been. Whatever the future holds, we will figure it out together. If that means children, wonderful. If not, that is fine too. You are enough exactly as you are." "You have been courting me," Hannah said, a smile tugging at her lips despite her tears. "Was I being too subtle?" She laughed, the sound like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Maybe a little." Samuel leaned forward and kissed her, gentle and sweet, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But she did not pull away. Instead, she wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with a passion that took them both by surprise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you," he said quietly. "I know it is too soon. I know you need time to heal, but I need you to know. This is not obligation or pity. This is real." "I am falling in love with you too," Hannah whispered back, "and it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because good things do not last in my life. They always get taken away." Samuel pulled her close again, holding her tight. "Then I will just have to prove you wrong." Spring came slowly to the Colorado Rockies, the snow melting gradually to reveal green grass and wildflowers. Samuel's small herd of cattle had survived the winter well, and he spent long days checking fences and preparing for the busy season ahead. Hannah worked beside him whenever possible, learning the rhythms of ranch life and discovering a strength in herself she had not known existed. The physical work was hard but satisfying, and she found herself sleeping better, eating better, living better than she had in years. But the specter of Harrison Brennan still hung over them. Samuel had heard through contacts in Pueblo that Harrison and his brother were still in the area, still making threats about reclaiming what was his. Samuel increased his vigilance, always carrying a weapon, always watching the horizon. He taught Hannah to shoot better, to ride faster, to be aware of her surroundings at all times. It was not the life he wanted for her, living with this constant fear, but until Harrison was dealt with, they had no choice. The confrontation came on a warm April afternoon. Samuel was out in the southern pasture when he heard the gunshot, a sharp crack that echoed off the mountains and sent ice through his veins. He spurred his horse into a gallop, racing back toward the cabin with his heart pounding. He found Hannah standing on the porch, rifle in hand, facing down Harrison Brennan and his brother. "Step away from her," Samuel said, his voice deadly calm as he dismounted. Harrison turned, and Samuel could see he was drunk, swaying slightly on his feet. His brother looked more sober but no less dangerous. "This is between me and my wife," Harrison slurred. "She is not your wife anymore," Samuel said, moving to stand between them and Hannah. "You gave up that right when you tried to kill her." "She is mine," Harrison insisted, his voice rising. "I own her. She does not get to just run off with some cowboy and pretend our marriage never happened." "You do not own me," Hannah said, her voice shaking but firm. "You never owned me. I was a person, not property, and I am done letting you control my life." Harrison's face twisted with rage and he drew his gun. Samuel was faster, his pistol clearing leather in a smooth motion. But before either man could fire, another shot rang out. Harrison jerked, a red stain spreading across his chest, then collapsed to the ground. His brother spun around to see the marshal and two deputies riding up from the tree line, the marshal's rifle still smoking. "Drop it," the marshal commanded, and Harrison's brother immediately raised his hands in surrender. Samuel slowly lowered his weapon, his heart still racing. The marshal dismounted and checked Harrison's pulse, then shook his head. "He is gone." "Self-defense," Samuel said immediately. "He drew first." "I know," the marshal said. "We have been tracking these two for days, got warrants for their arrest out of Kansas. Turns out Harrison Brennan is wanted for murder back east, killed a man in a bar fight and fled. When I heard you had his wife at your ranch, I figured he would come for her eventually. Sorry it took us this long to get here." Samuel looked at Hannah, who had lowered the rifle and was staring at Harrison's body with an expression he could not quite read. He went to her immediately, gently taking the rifle from her hands and pulling her close. "It is over," he murmured. "He can never hurt you again." Hannah was trembling, but she was not crying. Instead, she seemed to be processing, working through emotions too complex to name. "I should feel something," she said quietly. "Relief or grief or something, but I just feel empty." "That is normal," the marshal said gently. "You have been living in fear for a long time. It will take a while for it to sink in that you are really free now." They took Harrison's brother into custody, along with Harrison's body to be buried in town. The marshal assured Samuel and Hannah that there would be no charges, that it was clearly self-defense. After they left, Samuel and Hannah stood together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. "What happens now?" Hannah asked softly. Samuel took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Now we live," he said simply. "We build the life we want without fear, without looking over our shoulders. We just live. Together, if you will have me." Hannah turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Samuel Xavier, are you asking me to marry you?" "I know it is soon," Samuel said. "I know you might need more time. But yes, that is exactly what I am asking. I love you, Hannah. I want to spend my life with you, build a home with you, grow old with you. If you need time to think about it, I understand, but I wanted you to know where I stand." Hannah smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through after a long storm. "I do not need time," she said. "I have known for weeks now what my answer would be. Yes, Samuel. Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring all his love and relief and joy into that single moment. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. They were married 6 weeks later in Pueblo, in a small ceremony attended by Doc Morrison, the marshal, and a handful of friends Samuel had made over the years. Hannah wore a simple blue dress that Samuel had bought for her in Denver, and she carried wildflowers that they had picked together that morning. Samuel wore his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed, looking more nervous than Hannah had ever seen him. "I have faced down armed outlaws with more calm," he muttered as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Hannah laughed and squeezed his hand. "It is just a wedding. We are already committed to each other. This is just making it official. I know, but I want to do this right. Want to give you the wedding you deserve. Samuel, after everything I have been through, standing here with a man who loves me and respects me is more than I ever dreamed possible. This is perfect." The ceremony was short but heartfelt, the preacher speaking about love and commitment and the sacred bond of marriage. When he pronounced them husband and wife and Samuel kissed his bride, there was not a dry eye in the small church. They celebrated with dinner at the hotel, then rode back to the ranch as the sun set, husband and wife, partners in every sense of the word. Their first year of marriage was everything Hannah had never dared to hope for. Samuel was patient and kind, never pushing her beyond what she was comfortable with, always checking to make sure she felt safe and loved. He worked hard to make the ranch profitable, and Hannah worked beside him, discovering a talent for managing the books and dealing with buyers. Together, they made a formidable team, earning respect from neighboring ranchers and building a reputation for fair dealing and quality livestock. Hannah's nightmares faded gradually, the terror that had haunted her sleep for years finally loosening its grip. She still had bad days, moments when a raised voice or sudden movement would send her spiraling back into fear. But Samuel was always there, patient and understanding, helping her through it without judgment. And slowly, so slowly she almost did not notice it happening, Hannah began to heal. They took trips to Denver and Colorado Springs, Hannah experiencing cities she had only heard about. Samuel showed her the world beyond the ranch, but they always returned home with relief, both of them preferring the quiet isolation of their mountain sanctuary. They made friends with neighboring ranchers, attended barn dances and church socials, and gradually built a life that felt complete. On their first anniversary, Samuel surprised Hannah with a gift. He led her out behind the barn to where he had been working on a secret project for months. There, built of logs and love, was a small cabin. "I know we said we might not have children," Samuel said, watching Hannah's face carefully. "But I also know you loved being a school teacher before you married Harrison. I thought maybe you could start a school here for the ranch children in the area. This could be your schoolhouse." Hannah walked around the building, tears streaming down her face. It was perfect, with windows for light, a stone fireplace for warmth, and even a bell mounted above the door. Inside were desks, a blackboard, books, and supplies. Samuel had thought of everything. "How did you know?" she whispered. "You mentioned it once months ago. Said teaching was the only time you felt truly yourself. I want you to have that again." Hannah threw her arms around him, kissing him fiercely. "I love you so much," she said. "I love you more than I have words for." "I love you too," Samuel said, holding her tight. "Always will." The school opened that fall with 6 children from neighboring ranches attending. Hannah proved to be an excellent teacher, patient and creative, bringing learning to life in ways that engaged even the most reluctant students. Samuel would often stop by during the day, ostensibly to check on something but really just to watch his wife teach, her face glowing with happiness and purpose. Their second winter together was mild, with less snow than the year before. They spent evenings by the fire, Samuel carving and Hannah grading papers, or reading aloud from books they ordered from Denver. They talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in the silence but never running out of things to say. Samuel told her stories about his childhood, about his father who had taught him to work with his hands and his heart. Hannah told him about her dreams for the school, about students she thought had special potential, about the satisfaction of watching children discover the joy of learning. "You are happy," Samuel observed one night, watching her face as she described a particularly successful lesson. "I am," Hannah said, sounding surprised. "I really am. I did not think I could be again, but I am." "Good," Samuel said, pulling her close. "That is all I have ever wanted." Spring brought new life to the ranch. The cattle calved successfully, adding to their herd. The garden Hannah had planted flourished, providing vegetables they could eat fresh or preserve for winter. And one morning in early May, Hannah woke up feeling nauseated for the 3rd day in a row. She did not say anything at first, afraid to hope, afraid to be wrong. But when the nausea continued and she missed her monthly cycle, she finally made the trip into Pueblo to see Doc Morrison. He examined her carefully, asked her questions, and then smiled. "You are pregnant," he said. "About 6 weeks along, I would say." Hannah sat in stunned silence, her hand instinctively going to her belly. "But I thought I could not, after what happened before." "The human body is remarkable," Doc Morrison said. "Sometimes it just needs time and the right circumstances to heal. You are healthy, happy, and in a safe environment. Your body knew it was ready." Hannah rode home in a daze, trying to process this unexpected news. She was terrified, remembering the agony of losing her first pregnancy. But she was also filled with a cautious, growing joy. This was different. She was different. Samuel was different. Everything was different. She found Samuel in the barn fixing a broken stall door. He looked up when she entered, immediately sensing something was wrong. "What is it? Are you all right?" Hannah took a deep breath. "I am pregnant." Samuel froze, his hammer suspended in midair. "You are?" "Yes," Doc Morrison confirmed it. "I am about 6 weeks along." Samuel set down the hammer carefully, then crossed to her in 3 long strides. He cupped her face in his hands, searching her eyes. "How do you feel about it?" Terrified, Hannah admitted. But happy. So happy, Samuel. I never thought I would get this chance again. We are going to do this right, Samuel said firmly. No stress, no heavy work. You are going to rest and eat well and take care of yourself, and I am going to take care of both of you. I am not fragile, Hannah protested, but she was smiling. I know, but humor me anyway. The pregnancy was not easy. Hannah suffered from severe nausea for the first 3 months, barely able to keep food down. Samuel hovered constantly, bringing her crackers and ginger tea, rubbing her back when she was sick, reading to her when she was too exhausted to move. She had to close the school temporarily, but the families understood, all of them excited about the new baby coming to their community. As Hannah's belly grew, so did Samuel's protectiveness. He would not let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest every afternoon, and checked on her so frequently that she finally had to tell him to stop. I am pregnant, not dying, she said with exasperation. You need to let me do things. I know, Samuel said. I just worry. I know you do, and I love you for it, but I need you to trust that I will tell you if something is wrong. I am not going to take risks with this baby. Samuel nodded, backing off slightly but never completely. He showed his love in other ways, building a beautiful cradle out of cherry wood, painting the spare bedroom in soft yellows and greens, ordering baby clothes and blankets from Denver. He talked to Hannah's belly every night, telling their unborn child stories and promises, and Hannah would fall asleep to the sound of his voice. Doc Morrison came out to the ranch regularly to check on Hannah, pronouncing himself satisfied with her progress. The baby is growing well, he said during one visit. Strong heartbeat, good position. I think you are going to have an easy delivery. Hannah hoped he was right, but as her due date approached in early December, she grew increasingly anxious. This was around the time she had lost her first baby, and the memories haunted her. Samuel seemed to sense this, staying even closer than before, rarely leaving her side. The baby came 2 weeks early, on a cold December night exactly 2 years after Samuel had found Hannah in the mountains. Hannah's labor started just after dinner, mild contractions that gradually grew stronger. Samuel immediately sent for Doc Morrison, then stayed with Hannah, holding her hand and helping her breathe through the pain. I cannot do this, Hannah gasped at one point when the contractions were coming fast and hard. Yes, you can, Samuel said firmly. You are the strongest person I know. You can do anything. Doc Morrison arrived just as Hannah's water broke, quickly setting up in the bedroom and giving instructions. The labor was long and difficult, stretching through the night and into the early morning hours. Samuel stayed beside Hannah the entire time, letting her squeeze his hand until it bruised, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, encouraging her when she wanted to give up. Finally, as dawn light started to filter through the windows, a baby's cry filled the cabin. Doc Morrison held up a squalling, red-faced infant, his voice full of joy. It is a boy, he announced. A healthy baby boy. Hannah burst into tears as Doc Morrison placed the baby on her chest. He was perfect, with dark hair and a strong set of lungs, and she immediately fell completely in love. Samuel was crying too, looking at his wife and son with an expression of such pure joy that it made Doc Morrison smile. You did it, Samuel whispered, kissing Hannah's forehead. You did it, love. He is perfect. They named him James after Samuel's father. He was an easy baby, sleeping well and nursing without difficulty. Samuel was a devoted father, constantly holding his son, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with James when he was fussy. Hannah would often wake in the night to find Samuel sitting in the rocking chair with James in his arms, talking softly to him about everything and nothing. You are going to be a good man, Samuel would murmur. Strong and kind like your mother. You are going to grow up knowing you are loved, knowing you are safe. No one is ever going to hurt you or make you feel small. I promise you that." Hannah would pretend to be asleep, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed with love for her husband and son. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier and more chaotic but deeply satisfying. Hannah reopened the school when James was 3 months old, bringing him with her and letting him sleep in a cradle near her desk. The students were enchanted, taking turns holding the baby during recess and learning about responsibility and gentleness. Samuel continued to run the ranch, now with additional motivation to make it successful for his son's future. James grew quickly, hitting all his milestones early. He was walking by 10 months, talking in sentences by 18 months, and had his father's adventurous spirit combined with his mother's quick mind. Samuel taught him to ride almost as soon as he could walk, setting him on a gentle mare and leading him around the corral. Hannah taught him letters and numbers, reading to him constantly and encouraging his natural curiosity. When James was 2, Hannah became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, with less nausea and more energy. She continued teaching almost until her due date, finally stopping only when she could no longer fit behind her desk. Their daughter was born on a beautiful spring morning, arriving quickly and easily. They named her Sarah, and she was as different from James as night from day. Where he was energetic and boisterous, she was calm and thoughtful. Where he was always moving, she was content to sit and observe. "We are balanced now," Samuel said one night, holding Sarah while James played at their feet. "One of each. Is our family complete?" Hannah asked, smiling at the picture they made. Samuel looked at her, his eyes full of love. "Our family was complete the day I found you in the mountains. Everything since then has just been extra blessings." The years flowed past, marked by seasons and milestones. James started school with the other ranch children, proving to be a natural leader who looked out for the younger kids. Sarah developed a love of music, and Samuel bought her a small piano from Denver, placing it in the corner of the main room. The house was always full of noise and life, children playing and learning and growing. The ranch prospered, Samuel's hard work and Hannah's business sense combining to make them one of the most successful operations in the area. They expanded their herd, bought more land, and hired ranch hands to help with the work. But despite their growing wealth, they remained humble and generous, helping neighbors in need and supporting community projects. Hannah continued teaching, her school gaining a reputation for excellence that drew families from further and further away. Some years, she had as many as 20 students, ranging from 6 to 16 years old. She loved watching them grow and learn, celebrating their successes and encouraging them through their struggles. Many of her former students went on to college or successful careers, and they always credited Miss Hannah, as they called her, with giving them the foundation they needed. Samuel served as an informal marshal for the area, helping resolve disputes and occasionally tracking down rustlers or other criminals. He was known as a fair but tough man, someone who could be counted on to do the right thing even when it was difficult. But he always made sure his work never took him away from his family for long. Nothing was more important than Hannah and the children. James grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's intelligence and compassion. He was courting a neighbor's daughter by the time he was 19, and Samuel gave him a piece of land to build his own cabin on. The wedding was a grand affair, with half the county in attendance, and Hannah cried happy tears watching her son pledge his life to a woman who clearly loved him. Sarah proved to be musically gifted, her piano playing becoming the highlight of every community gathering. She also inherited her mother's teaching ability, helping with the younger students at the school and showing remarkable patience. When she was 16, a music teacher from Denver heard her play and offered to take her on as a student. It was a difficult decision, but Samuel and Hannah encouraged her to go, knowing she needed opportunities they could not provide on the ranch. "She will come back," Samuel assured Hannah as they watched Sarah's stage leave for Denver. "This is her home. She will come back," and he was right. Sarah spent 3 years in Denver, studying music and experiencing city life, but she returned to the ranch with a husband in tow, a gentle musician named Thomas, who fit into their family as if he had always been there. They built a house on the property, and Sarah opened a music school, teaching piano and voice to children throughout the region. Samuel and Hannah grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down, but the love between them never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by years of partnership and shared experiences. They still sat by the fire most evenings, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. They still kissed each other good night every evening and good morning every day. They still made each other laugh, still supported each other's dreams, still chose each other every single day. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. The ranch was packed with family and friends. 3 generations gathered to celebrate. James was there with his wife and 3 children. Sarah was there with Thomas and their 2 daughters. Former students came, now adults with families of their own. Neighbors and friends filled the yard, eating and dancing and celebrating love. Samuel stood up to make a speech, pulling Hannah to her feet beside him. 25 years ago, I found this woman in the mountains, half frozen and left to die. I brought her home thinking I was saving her life. What I did not know was that she was going to save mine. Hannah, you made me believe in love again, in goodness and second chances. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to be better than I was. Every day with you has been a gift, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." Hannah was crying, as was half the crowd. "Samuel, you saw worth in me when I could not see it in myself. You gave me safety, respect, and a love I did not know existed. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. I love you more today than I did 25 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." They kissed to thunderous applause, and the party continued long into the night. But eventually, the guests left, and Samuel and Hannah found themselves alone on the porch, watching the stars come out over the mountains. "Hard to believe it has been 25 years, Hannah said softly. "Best 25 years of my life," Samuel replied, pulling her close. "Mine too." They stood there in comfortable silence, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of wildflowers and the promise of tomorrow. Inside the house, the cradle Samuel had built so many years ago waited in the spare room, ready for future grandchildren. The piano Sarah had loved sat in the corner, its keys worn smooth by countless practice sessions. The school building stood behind the barn, waiting for Monday morning and the students who would arrive eager to learn. Everything they had built, everything they had become, started with a choice Samuel made on a cold December day. A choice to follow blood in the snow, to help a stranger, to see worth in someone the world had discarded. That choice had changed both their lives, had created a family, had built a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. "I have been thinking about something," Hannah said, breaking the silence. "What is that?" "About that day you found me. I was so close to giving up, Samuel. If you had been an hour later, I do not think I would have made it, but you came. Against all odds in all that wilderness you found me. Best day of my life," Samuel said simply. "Mine too." Even though I was dying, even though I was terrified, some part of me knew that my life was about to change, that I was being given a second chance. Samuel turned to face her, cupping her face in his weathered hands. We were both given a second chance that day. I was just existing before you, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to really live. They kissed, sweet and tender, a kiss that held 25 years of love and commitment and partnership. When they broke apart, both were smiling. The years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren, more joy, more memories. Samuel taught his grandsons to ride and rope, passing on the skills his father had taught him. Hannah taught her granddaughters to read and think critically, encouraging them to be strong and independent. Together, they watched their family grow and flourish, secure in the knowledge that they had built something lasting. Samuel's health began to fail when he was 68, his heart growing weaker with each passing month. He faced it with the same calm acceptance he had brought to everything in his life, making sure his affairs were in order and spending as much time with his family as possible. Hannah rarely left his side, holding his hand and telling him stories about their life together. "I am not afraid," Samuel told her one night, his voice weak but steady. "I've lived a full life, loved and been loved. I have no regrets." "I am not ready to let you go," Hannah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I know, but you are strong, Hannah. You have always been strong. You will be all right, because of you, because you taught me how." Samuel smiled, squeezing her hand weakly. "No, love, you were always strong. I just helped you see it." He died peacefully in his sleep 3 days later, Hannah beside him, holding his hand. The entire community turned out for his funeral, people traveling from as far as Denver to pay their respects. He was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a large oak tree with a simple headstone that read, "Samuel Xavier, beloved husband and father, he chose love." Hannah grieved deeply, the loss of her partner leaving a hole in her life that could never be filled. But she did not break. She continued teaching, continued spending time with her children and grandchildren, continued living the life Samuel would have wanted for her. She told stories about him constantly, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had not known him well. She lived another 15 years, active and engaged until the very end. She died at 83, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, whispering Samuel's name with her last breath. They buried her beside him on the hill, her headstone reading, "Hannah Barrett Xavier, beloved wife and mother, she chose courage." James took over the ranch, running it with the same integrity and hard work his father had shown. Sarah continued her music school, her playing as beautiful at 60 as it had been at 16. Their children and grandchildren spread throughout Colorado and beyond, carrying with them the values Samuel and Hannah had instilled: honesty, compassion, hard work, and above all, love. The schoolhouse Hannah built still stands, now a museum dedicated to her memory and the importance of education in rural communities. The cabin Samuel built by hand is maintained by the family, a reminder of where it all started. And every year, on the anniversary of the day Samuel found Hannah in the mountains, the family gathers on the ranch to celebrate love, second chances, and the power of choosing to help a stranger. Because that is what it all came down to in the end: a choice. A cowboy could have kept riding, could have ignored the blood in the snow, could have decided that someone else's problem was not his concern. But Samuel Xavier chose differently. He chose compassion over convenience, love over loneliness, hope over despair. And that choice, made on a cold December day in 1882, rippled forward through generations, creating a family and a legacy that would endure for over 100 years. The story of Samuel and Hannah became legend in Pueblo County, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires. It was a story about survival and redemption, about finding love in the most unlikely circumstances, about two broken people who healed each other and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. It was a story that reminded people that it is never too late for a second chance, that love can bloom even in the coldest winter, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply choose to care. On the hill where Samuel and Hannah rest, wildflowers bloom every spring, painting the grass in brilliant colors. Their great-great-grandchildren bring their own children to visit, telling them stories about the cowboy who tracked a woman through the snow and the love that blossomed from that act of mercy. The wind whispers through the oak tree, carrying with it the essence of a love story for the ages, a testament to the enduring power of compassion, courage, and choosing to see worth in another human being. And somewhere in that wind, if you listen closely, you can almost hear Samuel's voice, steady and sure, telling Hannah one more time that she is strong, that she is loved, that she is enough exactly as she is. And you can hear Hannah's laughter in response, bright and free, the sound of a woman who learned to live again, who found joy after despair, who proved that even the darkest winters eventually give way to spring. Their story ended as all stories must, but what they built together continues. The ranch still operates, now in its sixth generation of family ownership. The values they embodied still guide their descendants, and the love they shared, pure and true and hard-won, remains an inspiration to everyone who hears their tale. In the end, Samuel and Hannah Xavier proved that love is not about finding a perfect person, but about choosing to see perfection in someone imperfect, about building a life together one day at a time, about refusing to give up on each other even when the world says you should. They proved that the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up for another person, to track them through the snow when everyone else has abandoned them, to say with your actions what words alone can never convey. You matter. Your life has worth. You are not alone. And that, more than anything, is why their story endures. Because in a world that often feels cold and unforgiving, in times when it seems easier to look away than to help, Samuel and Hannah remind us that love is always the answer. That choosing compassion over indifference, connection over isolation, can change not just one life but generations of lives. That we all have the power to be someone's second chance, someone's hero, someone's reason to keep going. The sun sets over the Colorado Rockies, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the same sky Samuel and Hannah watched together for so many years. The ranch grows quiet as night falls, lights twinkling in the windows of houses built by their children and grandchildren. And on the hill, two simple headstones stand side by side, marking the resting place of two extraordinary people who lived in extraordinary love. Their bodies may have returned to the earth, but their spirits remain woven into every stone of the ranch, every board of the schoolhouse, every note played on Sarah's piano, every lesson taught to eager students, every moment of kindness shown by their descendants. Samuel and Hannah Xavier may be gone, but they will never be forgotten. Their love story, beginning with blood in the snow and a cowboy's choice to care, will be told for generations to come, a beacon of hope in dark times, a reminder that love can triumph over even the cruelest circumstances. And perhaps that is the greatest legacy anyone can leave. Not wealth or fame, but a story worth telling, a love worth remembering, a life that inspired others to be better, kinder, more compassionate. Samuel and Hannah achieved that and more. They turned tragedy into triumph, abandonment into belonging, fear into love. They built a family, a community, a legacy that will endure long after their names are forgotten by those who never knew them. But for those who did know them, who felt the warmth of their welcome and the strength of their love, Samuel and Hannah Xavier will live forever. In memories shared around dinner tables, in stories told to wide-eyed children, in the values passed down through generations, they remain present and powerful. The cowboy who tracked a woman through the snow, and the woman who survived the unsurvivable, found each other against impossible odds and created something beautiful that will never truly end. That is the power of love. That is the legacy of choice. That is the story of Samuel and Hannah Xavier, two souls who found each other in the wilderness and built a life worth living, a love worth celebrating, and a legacy worth preserving. Their journey may have ended, but their impact continues, rippling forward through time, touching lives they never met, inspiring love stories they will never hear about, proving that one act of compassion on a cold December day can change the world in ways both large and small. The mountains stand eternal, silent witnesses to countless stories of survival and love. But few stories shine as brightly as the one that began with a cowboy following blood in the snow, determined to save a stranger, never knowing that in doing so, he was saving himself. That is how the best love stories always begin, with a choice to care, a decision to help, a moment when someone decides that another person's life matters enough to risk their own comfort, safety, or plans. Samuel made that choice. Hannah accepted it with courage. And together they built something that will endure forever. A love that conquered fear, a family that spans generations, and a reminder that even in the darkest winters, spring always comes. Even when we are abandoned in the mountains, left to die in the cold, there is hope. Because somewhere, somehow, there might be a cowboy tracking through the snow, following our trail, determined to find us and bring us home. And when that happens, when love finds us in our darkest hour, miracles become possible. That is the truth Samuel and Hannah Xavier lived and the legacy they left behind. A truth worth remembering, a legacy worth honoring, and a love story worth telling again and again, from generation to generation, until the mountains themselves crumble into dust. Their love was real, their courage was genuine, and their impact will be felt forever in the hearts of all who hear their story and choose, as Samuel did, to track someone through the snow, to offer help when others turn away, to build love in the wilderness of human cruelty and indifference. This is their story, complete and true, a testament to the enduring power of love, the importance of second chances, and the way one person's choice to care can echo through eternity, changing lives, building families, and proving that love, in the end, always wins.